Welcome to Psyche Talks.
And welcome to the deep dive.
Today we're diving deep into some really powerful insights from a summary of Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book.
It really is. And you might think, okay, money, psychology, maybe charts, market stuff, but this material, it hits different, you know?
Totally. The core idea is that being good with money, it's not really about how smart you are or if you have these super complex strategies.
Right.
It's fundamentally about your behavior, how you act.
Yeah, it flips the script, doesn't it? From like the technical side of finance to the actual human making the decisions, our biases, how we handle pressure, our own history.
That's the real engine, it seems.
Yeah.
Maybe even more than just raw intelligence.
Exactly. Less what you know, more how you behave. So our mission today is basically to unpack the biggest takeaways from this summary. We want to get a handle on this psychological side of wealth.
Mm-hmm. How we earn it, sure. But maybe more importantly, how we keep it.
And why sometimes, people who seem to have it all figured out end up losing it.
And for you listening, this is all about practical stuff. Insights you can hopefully look at and think, okay, how does this actually connect to my financial life? Understanding the forces acting on you wherever you are right now.
Okay, let's jump in. The very first big idea the source hits on is this. No one's crazy.
Huh, yeah. It sounds weird at first.
Because you look around, and sometimes people's money decisions seem, well, baffling. Maybe even totally irrational from where you stand.
But the book argues, you dig a little deeper, and those choices, they make perfect sense to them based on their reality.
That's such a key point. Your feelings about money, how much risk feels okay, how you save, it doesn't just appear out of nowhere.
Right. It's profoundly shaped by your own life story, the economic times you've lived through, maybe even just random events you witnessed. And, what you personally experienced, that feels like the whole truth, the complete picture.
The source gives that great example, comparing someone born in, say, 1950 versus 1970.
Yeah, think about that. Born in 1950, you grew up seeing the stock market. Yeah, it had bumps, but overall delivered really strong returns for decades. So the market feels kind of reliable, a place to build wealth.
Makes sense.
But born in 1970, your formative years might have included crazy high inflation, oil shocks, a whole decade where the market basically went sideways. The market you saw looks totally different.
Yeah.
Feels maybe riskier, more unstable.
Same market, completely different lived experience, different feeling about it.
Exactly. And it's not just stocks, right? Like if your parents lived through the Great Depression, saw banks fail.
Oh, yeah.
That creates a totally different relationship with cash, with banks, than someone who grew up when everything felt booming and secure.
You might see someone holding tons of cash, losing to inflation and think that's nuts, but if their family lost everything in a bank failure, keeping cash might feel like the only sane thing to do for them.
And that really highlights how financial decisions aren't just cold, logical calculations off a spreadsheet. They're made by people, full of emotions, fear, hope, worry, maybe even past trauma playing a role. You might save like crazy, not just because the math says so, but because the fear of ending up poor feels really real because of something you saw or lived through.
Which makes judging other people's choices, well, pretty pointless, doesn't it?
Totally unfair.
Yeah.
You see the decision, the tip of the iceberg, but you don't see the whole lifetime of experiences and emotions underneath.
Yeah.
And people are just playing different games with their money. Different goals, different time horizons, different things they're willing to risk.
Right, like a day trader versus someone saving for retirement. Totally different games.
Exactly. And problems pop up when we start judging one game by the rules of another. Their rationality makes sense only within their game and given their background.
So maybe a good question for you listening is, what experiences in your life, big or small, do you think have really shaped how you feel and act about money? It's probably deeper than you think.
Okay, let's switch gears to something else that's huge, but often kind of invisible. Luck and risk.
Oh, yes. The uncomfortable truth.
The source really hammers this home. These unpredictable things play a much bigger role in how things turn out financially than we usually like to admit.
We love those neat stories, don't we? Worked hard, was smart, got rich. It feels right. It feels controllable.
But the material says, hang on, that story is missing some key parts.
Like the Bill Gates example.
Right. Brilliant guy, worked incredibly hard, no doubt. But the source points out this amazing bit of luck. His high school, Lakeside, back in 1968, it was one of the only high schools in the entire country with a computer terminal students could actually use.
Wow, that's rare.
Super rare, like maybe 300 kids in the whole U.S. had that kind of access then. So that specific random opportunity, pure luck, gave him thousands of hours of programming practice years before almost anyone else.
Huge head start, and they contrast that with his friend Ken Evans.
Yeah, tragic story. Equally smart, same school, same drive, looked like he was on a similar path.
But he died in a mountaineering accident. Just random, terrible risk.
It's such a stark illustration, isn't it? Unbelievable luck opening doors for one, uncontrollable risk slamming them shut for another. The point isn't that skill doesn't matter. It absolutely does.
Of course.
But you can't give all the credit for success just to skill, and you can't put all the blame for failure just on mistakes. Luck and risk are always in the mix. Always.
And that's hard to swallow sometimes, I think. Makes success feel a bit less earned and failure feel less fair. We like clear cause and effect.
We really do. And that's why the source warns about just trying to copy successful people blindly. You might mimic their habits, their strategies.
But you can't copy their luck.
Exactly. You can't replicate being born at the right time or stumbling into that one rare opportunity like the lakeside computer. The specific context, the random chances, those aren't transferable.
So the takeaway is what? Humility when you succeed, knowing luck helped.
Yeah, and maybe compassion when others fail, recognizing that unseen risks might have tripped them up.
And for your own finances. The practical lesson seems to be plan for surprises. Because risk is always lurking, even when you don't see it.
Absolutely. You need a plan that can handle reality, which is messy.
Okay, brace yourself for this next one. The idea of never enough. This chapter, wow, it kind of hits hard.
It really does. The message is stark.
Yeah.
The hardest financial skill. Maybe it's not making money. Maybe it's knowing when to stop pushing the goalposts.
Knowing when you have enough.
They tell the story of Rajat Gupta. Came from nothing, climbed all the way to the top head of McKinsey, the huge consulting firm, worth over $100 million.
I mean, that's incredible success by any measure.
Totally. Objectively incredibly wealthy. But he risked everything: his money, his reputation, even his freedom doing insider trading. Why? Because $100 million somehow wasn't enough for him.
That's just mind-blowing. It really drives home that dangerous core idea. If you don't define what enough looks like for you, the chase for more can push you into taking crazier and crazier risks.
And comparison, that's the gasoline on that fire, right?
Yeah. The thief of joy.
You feel fine, you feel content. Then you see someone else with a bigger house, a fancier car or whatever, and suddenly what you have feels small, inadequate. Comparison just keeps moving the finish line. It's endless.
The source contrasts this constant striving with someone like Warren Buffett, who, despite being unbelievably wealthy, lives pretty modestly.
Right. There's a trade-off. Chasing that extreme level wealth often means taking risks that could wipe out everything you've already built.
So knowing enough isn't about being lazy or unambitious.
Not at all. It's about recognizing what you truly value. Maybe your current security, your freedom, your reputation, and deciding that protecting that is more important than chasing the potential upside of some crazy risk just to get more.
Because some things, once lost, money just can't buy back. Like your reputation, your freedom, your peace of mind. Gupta lost all that chasing more than $100 million.
So the real actionable thing here, and it's super personal, is you need to figure out what enough means for your life. Not a number from someone else, but your own anchor.
And defining that gives you power, right? The power to say no.
Exactly. Power to walk away from bad deals, unnecessary stress, risks that just aren't worth it for you.
Yeah.
Like the book says, if you're always wanting more, you'll never actually feel rich no matter how much money you pile up.
Okay, shifting gears a bit. Let's talk about compounding, that sort of magical force in finance.
Ah, compounding. Yeah, we hear the term, but sometimes it feels a bit abstract.
The book makes it really concrete, again with Buffett. His genius is undeniable, but get this. Like, 99% of his net worth came after he turned 50.
Wow. 99% after 50.
And the vast majority came after age 65. It's the snowball rolling downhill, right?
Yeah.
Small, consistent gains just layering on top of each other year after year, decade after decade. Time is the secret sauce.
It's not about hitting home runs constantly. It's about getting decent, steady returns and just letting them cook for a long, long time. Patience is absolutely key.
Yeah, trying to time the market perfectly or chasing those super high-risk, flashy returns, that often just disrupts the simple power of letting the snowball grow.
And this connects to the idea of staying wealthy, which the source argues needs a totally different skill set than getting wealthy.
Right. The stuff that makes you rich isn't necessarily what keeps you rich.
The risk-taking, the boldness that might build a fortune, those same traits can destroy it if you don't dial them back.
They used Jesse Livermore, the famous trader, made and lost fortunes multiple times.
Exactly. He was brilliant at taking huge risks, predicting crashes. That made him rich. But he couldn't turn it off. The same instinct destroyed him eventually because he lacked the, maybe, humility, the caution needed to protect what he'd won.
So staying wealthy requires humility and a healthy dose of fear, or at least caution.
Yeah, respect for risk.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to be the absolute smartest to stay wealthy. You just need to avoid wiping out. Resilience, being financially unbreakable, that's often more valuable than hitting the absolute peak, but being fragile.
Staying in the game is the goal.
Absolutely. And that's where things like frugality come in. Real wealth, the book argues, isn't the fancy car or the big house. It's the money you don't spend. The unspent money, quietly compounding. It's invisible.
People who stay rich long-term tend to live below their means, right? Keeping that buffer.
Which leads right into that crucial idea of having a margin of safety, building in that cushion.
So important.
Huh.
Okay, speaking of value, the source poses a really interesting question. What's the highest form of wealth? Is it just the biggest number?
And the argument is, no, it's freedom, control over your time. That's what money can buy that's truly valuable.
That really lands. Money itself isn't the goal, it's the tool. The tool to buy options, flexibility.
Yeah.
The ability to wake up and decide how you spend your day. That feels like the ultimate luxury.
It really is. The source mentions studies where people actually value control over their time more than just getting the highest possible income. Yeah, like you could be a surgeon earning $500, right? Huge income. But if you're working 80 hours a week, always on call, your schedule dictated by others. Do you feel wealthier in terms of freedom than someone earning less but who has total control over their time and where they work? Maybe not.
That leads right into another cool idea. The man in the car paradox.
Yeah, this one's good. We buy the fancy car, the expensive watch, partly hoping people will admire us, right? See us as successful.
Sure, that's often the motivation.
But the paradox is, when you see someone driving a Ferrari, what do you actually think? Do you think, wow, that driver must be an amazing person?
Probably not. I probably think, wow, what an amazing car. I wish I had that car.
Exactly. The admiration goes to the object, not the owner. It's this weird disconnect. We chase external validation through spending, but it rarely lands where we intend it.
Real admiration comes from character, integrity, stuff money can't buy.
Which ties perfectly into wealth is what you don't see. Being rich is often visible, the spending, the lifestyle. But being truly wealthy, in the book's sense, that's invisible.
It's the savings account, the investments working behind the scenes, the financial security that gives you options.
Right. The more someone spends trying to show they're rich, the less actual invisible wealth they probably have socked away because they spent it.
The Ronald Read story, the janitor who secretly amassed $8 million through saving and simple investing, that's the ultimate example of invisible wealth.
Totally. And it circles back to the sheer power of saving. The source argues saving is maybe the most critical tool for building wealth, more important than just your income level.
Why? Because it's about the gap.
Exactly. Saving is the gap between your ego, how much you feel you need to spend to keep up appearances or feel good, and your actual income. Controlling that gap is everything.
And you're not just saving for a specific goal, like a house deposit. Saving itself is the goal.
Yeah, because it buys you that incredibly valuable, intangible thing. Freedom, flexibility, options for when life inevitably throws you a curveball. It's a lifestyle choice, rooted in humility, really. It buys optionality.
So the real aim isn't just the number, it's using the number to get control over your time, your life.
Makes sense.
Okay, let's talk about navigating the world as it actually is, which is unpredictable. The source is pretty blunt here. The biggest financial events, the ones that really move the needle, they're almost always surprises.
Yeah, history teaches us stuff, but it doesn't just repeat perfectly, does it? It rhymes, maybe. You can study past crashes, but the next big one, it'll probably look different.
Like 2008 or COVID hitting globally, or even huge shifts like after World War II.
Exactly. Massive impacts. Nobody really saw them coming in that specific way or scale. They completely reshape things. The biggest risks and maybe the biggest opportunities too often come out of left field.
And we have this bias, right? Hindsight bias. We look back and go, oh yeah, that was obvious.
But it wasn't obvious at the time. Relying only on past data to predict the future gives you this false sense of certainty. The really weird stuff, the outliers, they have the biggest impact.
So if you can't predict it, what do you do? The book's answer seems simple but really important. Build in room for error.
This is crucial because things will go wrong. Your plan won't execute perfectly.
Hmm.
Income fluctuates, unexpected costs pop up, markets tank. Life happens.
Right.
Room for error is just having that buffer, that margin of safety, accepting that you don't need everything to go perfectly right just to survive and hopefully thrive.
It's like that story about the WWII planes they
Oh
mentioned.
yeah, the bullet holes.
Yeah.
Engineers first wanted to reinforce where the returning planes got hit most.
Makes intuitive sense.
But a statistician said, no, reinforce the parts that don't have bullet holes on the planes that came back.
Hmm.
Because the planes hit there, they didn't make it home at all.
Ah, clever. So room for error is about surviving when you inevitably get something wrong.
Exactly. And that connects to another really powerful idea. Choosing reasonable over rational.
Meaning.
Well, on paper, a purely rational financial plan might tell you, say, invest every single spare penny because that maximizes potential returns.
Sounds logical.
But like we said, personal finance is more personal than finance.
Right.
That perfectly rational plan might be completely unsustainable emotionally. If having zero cash makes you panic and sell everything the moment the market dips 10%, that rational plan just blew up.
So a reasonable plan is one you can actually stick with.
Precisely. Maybe it means holding some cash, even knowing it loses a bit to inflation. But if that cash gives you peace of mind, helps you sleep, and stops you from making a huge mistake in a panic, then the reasonable plan is far better than the rational one you abandon.
It's not about being pessimistic. It's about being realistic, building resilience for the messy reality of life.
Absolutely. Building a plan that can actually handle reality.
Now, here's a fascinating curveball the source throws in about human nature. You are going to change.
Oh, the end of history illusion.
Hmm.
This is so true. We tend to think that who we are right now, our values, our goals, our personality, is pretty much the finished product.
Like, this is me.
Yeah. But the research shows we consistently underestimate how much we'll change in the future. Our priorities shift. What we want out of life evolves.
And that makes long-term financial planning really tricky, doesn't it?
Totally. You're making decisions today like buying that forever home or locking into a career just for the money for a future version of yourself whose desires you don't actually know yet.
The sports car you desperately want at 25 might seem kind of silly or impractical by 45.
Exactly. So the advice is value flexibility. Try to avoid locking yourself into really rigid, irreversible commitments based only on who you are today. Having the freedom to change your mind later, that's a form of wealth itself.
And related to that, there's this other powerful force, the stories we believe.
Ah, narratives. The source points out we don't just act on cold, hard facts when it comes to money. We act on stories. And we tend to glom onto stories that feel right, that are compelling, even if the data might point elsewhere.
The dot-com bubble is a classic example, right? The story of a new economy was just so powerful it swept people away.
Completely. It overwhelmed rational analysis for so many. And these stories, we believe, are often shaped by our own experiences, like we talked about earlier.
Right, if you saw your neighbor get rich, speculating on something.
That personal story might feel way more real and convincing than some expert report warning about a bubble. Your lived experience shapes the narrative you trust.
And especially when things feel uncertain or scary financially, we crave simple answers, right? We become really vulnerable to believing compelling stories, even if they're based more on hope than reality.
Definitely. Especially stories that fit with how we already see the world or ourselves.
Okay, so wrapping things up, the source brings these threads together, talking about the price of success, and then the author gets personal with his confessions.
Nothing's free.
Yeah.
Such a simple, powerful chapter title. Every gain has a cost.
What's the cost of investing success, according to this?
It's not just the money you put in. It's the volatility, the uncertainty, the doubt, the sleepless nights sometimes, that discomfort. That's the fee you pay for the potential long-term gains. It's not a fine for doing something wrong. It's the price of admission.
Like paying for a theme park ticket or the soreness after a workout. It comes with the territory.
Exactly. And trying to avoid paying that price by jumping in and out of the market, constantly changing strategies, seeking guarantees, that's often where people make their biggest mistakes, you have to be willing to endure the emotional fee.
So pulling it all together, understanding behavior matters most, acknowledging luck and risk, defining enough, using compounding, valuing freedom, seeing invisible wealth, building room for error, being reasonable, knowing you'll change, being wary of stories.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. But the core message seems really consistent, doesn't it? Financial success isn't about being the smartest person with the most complex spreadsheet. It's about managing yourself.
Yeah. It boils down to cultivating patience, Discipline in saving, avoiding stupid risks just for the sake of more, having the humility to accept you can't predict everything, and staying flexible.
And the confessions part is great because it shows Housel actually applies this stuff himself.
Right. He talks about saving aggressively, but mainly for the freedom it buys, not just for stuff. He uses simple, passive investments, accepting he won't beat the market.
Values being debt-free for peace of mind, even if maybe leverage could mathematically boost returns sometimes.
Exactly. Prioritizes independence over luxury. Says he's comfortable being potentially underinvested compared to what others might do, because his goal is resilience, survival. Avoids lifestyle creep as income goes up. Chooses experiences over things.
And he even says, hey, these are my beliefs based on my life, and they'll probably change, showing that humility and adaptability he talks about.
It really brings it home. Being wealthy, truly wealthy, in the sense this book describes, it's less about IQ points and more about patience, humility, discipline, and just understanding the messy, emotional reality of being human in an unpredictable world.
So a final thought for you listening, building on all this.
Given how deeply our financial lives are tangled up with our personal histories, our feelings, our biases, maybe take a moment to reflect. How might your own specific background, the things you've personally seen and lived through, be quietly shaping your relationship with money right now, maybe in ways you haven't really thought about? And perhaps even more pointedly, what does enough truly mean for your personal sense of peace and freedom? And how might actually defining that number or that feeling change the decisions you make next?
That's a powerful reflection point, really worth considering. Thank you for your support and for listening.